Welcome to Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens, a show for people who embrace the warm and cozy spirit of everyday living in the Midwest. From the blog Random Sweets, I'm your host, Staci Mergenthal. In this episode, I'm joined by Jill Van Veldhuizen, Molly Engquist, and Jessie Nesseim from the Old Courthouse Museum in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to talk about their exhibit, Cooking Up History, the Evolution of Kitchens and Cookbooks. From open hearths to smart appliances and handwritten notes and recipes to glossy celebrity cookbooks, we explore how kitchens and the recipes that fill them have evolved with social changes, war times, immigration, and technology. They're serving up history the fun way, one dish at a time. Jill, Molly, and Jessie, welcome to the show today.
Hello.
Thanks. Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Well, earlier this year, my mom lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so my mom and I visited the Old Courthouse Museum, which is in downtown Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And there's an exhibit there that we both found so interesting. We are a family of bakers, recipe cards, handed down recipes. We love the kitchen gadgets, all that kind of stuff. And so we found it really interesting. And I kept thinking, I wish I could have taken my podcast listeners along with me. I wish everybody could see this. It's really just such a neat exhibit. It's called Cooking Up History, the Evolution of Kitchens and Cookbooks. So I asked you three to join me and to share some of the stories kind of behind the scenes, but also what people will see there. And then talk about some of the artifacts behind the exhibit. Entice people to go see it themselves, or just let people know about it if they live far away and aren't going to be in the area and be able to visit. So we'll jump right in here. If you three want to introduce yourselves and tell me who you are and what you do for the museum, and then what role you played in this exhibit.
Go ahead, Jill.
I can go first. My name is Jill Van Veldhuizen. I'm one of the educators at the museum. So typically I do a lot of tours and outreach programs and things like that. But we have a small staff, so we kind of all do a little bit of everything. And I did most of the research and writing for this particular exhibit.
And that alone takes a lot of time, a lot more time than what people realize. I've had a job like that in the corporate world where you're writing even just a little 3 sentences that go on a little placard to describe an artifact, and how much time can go in those 3 sentences is pretty crazy. So, okay. Jessie?
Hi, I'm Jessie Nesseim. I'm the Curator of Collections for the Siouxland Heritage Museums, and my role was to kind of help Jill supplement her text with what we actually have for artifacts. And so looking at some of the different kitchen gadgets that we had, looking at the time frames from the different cookbooks that we wanted to use, and focus in on the connection between the cookbooks and some of the appliances that we had. So that was the fun part of getting to dive through all of the fun cookbooks that we have a lot of good cookbooks, so good collection of them.
Molly?
I'm the last one here. So my name is Molly Engquist. I'm the Curator of Exhibits. So what I do is take everything they do and make it look pretty for everybody.
You're the decorator.
The decorator, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it looks amazing, and how everything is laid out. It's just great. So, and I guess I should note in there, because you mentioned the Siouxland Heritage Museums. And so you're actually with the Siouxland Heritage Museum, and that has 3. Are there 3 museums under that umbrella?
Yeah, it's a museum system. It has our Pettigrew Home and Museum and our Old Courthouse Museum, which are our 2 biggest artifacts. And then we have our Museum Resource Center that Jessie kind of controls all the stuff that goes in and out of there. So yeah, that's the 3 of them.
Okay. Jessie holds the key for that then.
Yeah, she does.
Well, what inspired the idea for Cooking Up History? Was there a moment that, because Jill, were you the one that came up with the idea? Am I thinking that?
I was. And I'm not sure there was any particular moment, but I've always loved foodways. That's one of my favorite parts to learn about through different periods of history. I especially have always loved cookbooks. And I guess I spend a lot of time going through old recipes to use for some of our outreach programs. and started to kind of figure out some of the evolution of the cookbooks and how they really are a window into kitchens of the time. And just by reading through the changes in recipes, you can kind of see what kitchen implements or equipment were available, what packaged goods might have been available. And sometimes it surprises you, you know, out here on the plains, you could get oysters to cook with. So I really started being more interested in digging into those aspects.
And so when you brought the idea to the team, were they all on board? Like, yes, because we love food and recipes and kitchens too, or was it a hard sell?
Some of both.
I think the way that most of our exhibits they evolve. So it's usually something that is an interest to people, and most of the time it's interest to us, or else why do we do this?
Mm-hmm.
And then it always morphs into other things by input from other people. So that's kind of how we morphed it into just being about cookbooks and eating to that whole genre. Is the cookbook follow the kitchen, or does the kitchen follow the cookbook as the evolution of kitchens happen? So that's kind of where we landed on, I think. And it always changes as we go too, because we might have an artifact or somebody found another information out, and then we go down rabbit holes, and some of those rabbit holes we stay down and explore. Others we go, okay, we need to focus a little bit more again. So it's a lot of fun, and I think that's what usually makes a great exhibit, is that exploration with everybody and everybody working together.
Mm-hmm. That's a great observation. I have not thought of that. The cookbook, does the cookbook come before the how did you say that, Molly?
I don't remember.
Well, we could listen back, but
yeah,
but it was profound.
Did the kitchen follow the cookbook, or did the cookbook follow the kitchen?
It reminds me of the whole cottage cheese thing right now. You guys followed that?
No.
Why you can't find cottage cheese on the shelves? I thought there was some sort of a manufacturing issue or shortage or something. I didn't really know, and I'm not really finding anything other than social media, especially TikTok, has been pushing so many recipes and the idea of cottage cheese and the protein. And so a lot of the age of people that are on TikTok are like, ooh, cottage cheese. So we're going to make this little salad and do this little mix. And now it's like flying off the shelves. And there are some times when you go to the store and there's no cottage cheese. So did that cookbook come out? You know, I'm sure there's a cottage cheese cookbook out there by now. Which came
like
first?
Jello.
Yes, there
like
are.
Jello. Everything had to be made with Jello.
Right. Walk us through how would you describe the exhibit and what you hope that visitors will take away once they've gone through and come back out.
You want to cover that, Molly, since you design?
It's really kind of hard how, I guess I didn't really think about it that way, but it's kind of hard to just go through an exhibit until you get everything. You know, you read it over, you see all the artifacts, and you kind of go, you know, do we go chronologically? Do we go by types of things? Do we go, how do we go about it? So what we kind of just did was kind of start at the beginning, you know, where recipes were just, you know, showed to each other as you grow up, to getting them written on papers, to I'll let those guys kind of talk a little bit more about the meat and stuff about it, but just more of the items that we have and the location it needs to go in. We are in a historic building, so how we make things flow through exhibits always have to depend on, you know, what we have there. What rooms do we have? Can we put stuff? Will it fit through the door is one of our biggest things. We can't really take any doors out. So we kind of did it in that way, where we kind of started early and then going into, you know, fridges and stoves, and then really going into each of the decades.
Luckily, it's a historic building. Sometimes that means wide doorways. Sometimes it means narrow doorways. I remember there's a large, very heavy oven or stove in there, right?
Yeah.
And
refrigerator. So on the top.
A sink.
I like the one with the oven that has the fryer in the back corner. That was like my favorite oven. It's like, okay, I could get on board with that.
Right. Right. I wish some of those things would come back full circle, which a
Yeah,
lot of times they do in kitchen design. So,
Mhm.
and we can do whatever we want.
exactly.
Let's talk about first the evolution of the American kitchen. And so we don't know what's influencing the kitchen. Is it the cookbook, the kitchen, and products that are available and gadgets? But let's talk about how kitchens themselves have changed both physically and culturally. Can you talk a little bit about that, the changes over the decades?
Sure. So we kind of started all the way back at the beginning, and we wanted to really talk about the change from, not that long in our past. A kitchen was an open hearth with a table where you did your food prep as well as your eating, and probably hung out most of your free time if you had any. Um, Maybe a couple shelves to store a few pots and hanging stirring utensils and things like that. And, it evolved in not much over 100 years to the kitchens we know today with continuous work surfaces and any technology we could imagine. Um, Also really evolved culturally. In the early days, it was really the woman's domain. The man was the breadwinner, the woman was the cook and the housekeeper, and it remained that way for many years. And now our kitchens, men cook, women cook, the older kids in the household cook. It's kind of everybody's room. And I think those are both very big changes in a very short time.
When did cupboards become a thing?
Depends on what you mean by cupboards.
With
But kind of,
with doors, so
yes,
that
yes.
everything is closed
So
off.
they went through an evolution just like everything else. Originally you just had a few shelves, and then you started having freestanding cupboards with doors. And it wasn't until, the 1930s and 40s when every kitchen was starting to have that uniform work surface with the built-in cabinets. The stove was the same height. You had just that level surface all the way around your room to work at.
You start to see also the idea of cupboards becoming in when plumbing comes in, because you're eliminating spaces where that plumbing can go in. And a lot of times the pantry, which is where your storage of food becomes a giant cupboard, into now a bathroom or an offside kitchen area where you can wash and do things like that. But yeah, as soon as you get the technology and access to water, electricity, those progressions of the artifacts that we see just become from a cast iron pot over a fire to now a gas grill, and the goodies that we have in our kitchens today that we can play with.
I liked the furniture. I still love that look of, it's not really the big box store cupboards. It's more of a furniture piece, maybe an old dresser that you use for a buffet or a cupboard in your kitchen. I really like that.
And those are really becoming popular again.
Yep.
Okay.
A lot of people have the old style, Hoosier cabinet or clean right cabinet that they're incorporating into their modern kitchens.
Well, and then what you were talking about, Jill, too, but the social changes. So how you said it was the women's job, and then we had the war, and women had to go to work, and things changed, and then the social changes about the women entering the workforce. So did that have an effect on the design or meals, tools, anything like that?
Definitely on tools and recipes. I think technology allowed women to start getting out of the home. They started having more free time because cooking was no longer a full-time job. But also society, women started wanting that. They wanted to work outside the home. And so then the kitchen had to evolve a little more to, have quick meals. Things like crock pots became popular. The Cuisinart, the food processor, became popular, as well as recipes that were basically just combining a lot of packaged goods into a meal, just so that it could be really quick. You could throw it together quickly after both the man and the woman got off work.
Right. I mean, we think about tater tot hot dish, right? Well, there was a day when there weren't tater tots in the freezer section or canned soup, I suppose. So if there was a hot dish, it was all from scratch.
Sure.
And then things changed. And what were some of those game changers of technology? I mean, there's the microwave.
Sure.
Um,
Early on there were kind of three big developments and they kind of hit, pretty rapidly in succession. The enclosed iron cook stove, of course, was the first, moving from that open hearth, you had an enclosed stove that came into the home. Electrification, which allowed for a lot of those fun kitchen appliances that we love, but most importantly, refrigeration. You can't have a refrigerator without electricity. And the Rural Electrification Act in the 1930s made that so that that was commonplace in homes, even in rural areas. And then production and transportation of packaged goods. Technology, machine work allowed for these goods to be produced, packaged, sent all over the country with the improvements in the railroads and things like that. And so those were the three really big early on changes. And honestly, after that, there wasn't a lot of big changes. The microwave would probably be the next one in the 1860s, but those were kind of the three big ones that allowed us to move from that very primitive kitchen to the room that we know today.
Makes you wonder, is there something that we don't know about that's gonna, change things 50, 100 years from now?
Yeah.
They didn't know then, and so now you just wonder. But well, walk us through just one or two when you're thinking about walking through this exhibit, one or two of the historical kitchens or spaces that you designed and why that made the cut. That might be a Molly question. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so I would say I really like how the refrigerators and stoves kind of turned out because we kind of have like how you preserve the food and how you cook the food right next to each other for a couple different periods. And I really liked that. And then I really like our interactive of our like more our 40s, 50s. We recreated a countertop and kitchen that you could walk up to. I mean, yes, our stove and oven are behind barriers, so you can't really play with those. But then we made all the shelving and everything in the cabinet to open up and explore more things so kids can get involved with it a little bit more in case, I think the biggest thing with this exhibit, what I've always loved is watching people go through and talking to each other, especially if you have 3 or 4 generations in there, it's like grandma used to use one of those, or it's like that should not be in there because I have that still in my cupboard,
Yeah.
It shouldn't be in a museum. But and just watching them talk and stuff like that. So if you have a younger generation, you're talking to them about it, but then they can also go play with the stuff and find more things in those cupboards. So I really like that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
I might have jumped ahead with some of the other.
No, that's okay. It just made me
tangents.
chuckle because you said for the kids, and I'm like, wait a minute, I did that. I was opening the drawers. I'm like, Mom, look at that.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
50 some years
you're a
old. I'm
kid
like,
at heart.
Mom, look at
It's a
this.
kid at heart. That's all
Right.
good.
We're
I
all
want to be able to
kids.
do that.
Well, that was kitchens. Let's sort of transition here, and I want to talk about cookbooks and sort of the cultural snapshot that we get when we look at these cookbooks. And it can be anywhere from ingredients to methods. When you see some of these older cookbooks and they say to use oleo and nut meats, which sometimes I'm somebody who at one point wouldn't even make a cookie recipe that was my mom's handed down because I thought nut meats was something weird. And she's like, there's nothing weird in that. I'm like, yeah, Mom, nut meats. She's like, those are just nuts. But that's what they used to call them in a recipe. Uh, so what is the oldest cookbook that you have in the exhibit?
That's a
So
Jessie.
one of the older ones that we have is the Queen City cookbook, which is actually produced here in Sioux Falls. And what I love about cookbooks is the fact that you have advertisements of your local places where you can pick up your supplies. Well, a lot of times it's not just a general store, it's a drugstore that you're going to pick up things like cinnamon and cardamom and vanilla. So it's like, I never would have thought that that's where I would find more of these ingredients. This cookbook in particular, with the being the Queen City, has notable names in it like Butterfield, Jones, Eddy, Drake, which are names of some of the companies that you can see in the advertisements. So it's like Mrs. Drake is putting in her recipe for veal cutlets and tomatoes today.
Oh.
So, but in a cookbook too, not only is Mrs. Drake putting in a recipe that she thinks everybody else will enjoy, but later on there's information about how to provide the sick something. So you have somebody ill in your house. How can you boil meat and make a broth to the best broth to help them with what their ailments are as well? How to get a stain out of your linens that you just had after a dinner party. Those are also the kind of transitional thing that we don't think of in a cookbook today, where we're thinking, oh, Jello. What can many things can I do with Jello? Well, Jello also makes me feel good when I'm sick, personally. So that should be underneath there too.
Right. It's like the hospital cookbook.
That's right.
What year was the Queen City? You said that's the
This
oldest.
one is 1891. Sorry.
1891.
Yeah.
Queen City was Sioux Falls referred to that or called that? I mean, we have the Queen City Bakery in
Yeah.
Sioux Falls, which is amazing, but behind the name Queen City, is that what Sioux Falls was kind of nicknamed?
It was
Yes.
for a time.
Okay.
It
Well,
was a
there.
popular nickname for
A
a
lot
lot
of-
of cities around the country, because even
Oh.
the town that I grew up in was nicknamed the Queen City as well. And it also was in South Dakota, but on the other side of the state.
Oh, okay. Oh, West River, East River. Here we go.
Mm.
Even Sioux City, I think, was nicknamed the Queen City as well.
Okay.
Market
So,
employee, I'm sure, to bring businesses and
Yeah.
settlers here.
Right. So that's funny, Mrs. Drake, they probably owned the grocery market or something where you'd buy the veal, and then she's got a recipe in there. It's kind of like the old influencers, right?
Mhm. Yep.
All right. They just don't have
Could be.
TikTok.
Nope.
Early American cooks, they used recipe books, or what I learned by reading a book called The Kitchen Front. It's one of my best. It's just a fiction, a novel, a book. Amazing, fun story. And I learned in that because I thought they were spelling it wrong. I'm like, oh, grammar, police here. It's not receipt, it's recipe. And then I learned that they did actually call them receipts. And so did recipes sort of start as they were really just a list of ingredients, but no, like you were expected to know how to make the thing with the ingredients in front of you, right? How has
Sure.
the
And
recipe and the writing of them evolved?
so receipt is kind of a holdover from, oh, I don't know, 18th century England. And receipt originally was used as kind of an apothecary term for the instructions for preparing, medicines or compounds. And
Oh,
so it kind of held over into some of these early cooking instructions. So originally it meant instructions more than a list of ingredients. And I think that change to recipe came when people started writing the list of ingredients as well as the instructions. Um, but very early books were handwritten. They were notes. Sometimes it might be a list of your ingredients, or it might just be, don't forget this, remember to do that. Um, they were more of a memory aid, kind of like making note cards before you give a talk, that kind of thing.
and so Jill, having seen all these cookbooks and knowing the sort of that evolution, how has the cookbook itself changed? You already mentioned how a lot of times they would include advertisements, or a lot of times sort of the good housekeeping type hints and tips, how to make a bed, how to keep ants out of your kitchen, like those kinds of things. What other things did you see? How did you see it evolve? And kind of when did it happen where it changed to where you're just doing a recipe and a cookbook like what we see today?
Sure. It was kind of a slow change. If you look back to some of the earliest cookbooks, a lot of them are just text. They aren't. Today we kind of have the visual breakout of recipes where you have your list of ingredients and then your instructions.
And
A lot of
photos.
times, and photos.
And
Yes,
photos, yeah.
definitely. Very early on, a lot of it was just paragraphs that almost run into each other. To make bread, you do this. To make pie crust, you do this. Oh, if you need to dye your linens, this is, they weren't even well sorted into different categories a lot of times. And as Jessie mentioned, those early cookbooks had a lot to do with taking care of sick people in your house because doctors weren't always available. So not just foods for people who were ill, but also different herbs you might be able to use for medications, to cure toothache or a headache or whatever have you. A lot of cookbooks were sort of household instruction manuals early on.
Mm.
And it wasn't until these rapid kitchen changes started coming along and people could no longer cook the way mother taught them because they no longer had the same equipment. You got that cook stove, and that quickly evolved from wood and coal burning to gas and maybe even electric. And your kitchen was so different than the kitchen you grew up in that you needed a little extra help. And so women started relying on cookbooks to help them use the different tools and goods that were available, as well as inspiration for recipes using all of these new food sources that quickly became available with the increase in transportation and distribution.
Mhm. Because a lot of the foods people used back in the day, as we say, but like you had said earlier, people didn't have a lot of free time. Everybody grew their own food, they churned their own butter. And so then how do they measure those types of things when they're buying it from the store instead of like how mom wrote it down or grandma too? Here's one of my favorite things, community cookbooks. I love community cookbooks. I have way too many and I'll still buy more. Um, when did church ladies and community groups start compiling those, and have they evolved at all? They still kind of just the same? Most of them don't have photos or anything.
I think it depends on the community cookbook. Part of what makes them special is that they are all a little bit different depending on the group putting them out. Really, the first community cookbook was thought to have been published in 1864 during the Civil War.
Oh,
There were these sanitary fairs that women were having to kind of raise funds for the war effort and kind of make them feel like they were a part of it. And so different groups started compiling recipes and trying to sell them to raise a little bit of money. And it wasn't until after the Civil War that they really took off because printing advances had allowed for them to be produced a little less expensively. And then, of course, they were looking to raise money for people affected by the war, widows, children that were orphaned, that kind of thing. And it really took off from there. I think part of the popularity came from the Buckeye Cookbook, which is one of my favorite historic cookbooks. It was put together by a church group in Ohio in the 1870s, and they had a mastermind who really worked on marketing, and it just spread. I wouldn't say quite nationally, but definitely all through the upper Midwest. It was reprinted several times. They were really smart. They did it on subscriptions. So they waited until they had enough people to do their next printing, and then they sent them out. And even though it was a community cookbook, it was all encompassing. It had hundreds of recipes in it. Um, the popularity really spread. And for a lot of people in our area, it was the first cookbook that women owned in their kitchen.
is that a cookbook that you can still, or there
There are reprints. So
there are
yes, you could,
reprints
yeah.
you can buy or get from a library? Do libraries carry those? Do you know?
Sometimes, and sometimes if it's an original printing, it's part of the research collection and you can't check it out,
Oh,
but some of the reprints are in public libraries.
sure. I like how the names of people who have submitted things evolve. So right now mine would just say submitted by Staci Mergenthal, but had I submitted one many years ago, it would say Mrs. Jason Mergenthal because people knew you by who your husband
Right.
was,
Yes.
right? So,
I do like, we have a cookbook from, it's called the White Ribbon Cookbook, and it's done by the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And that organization was really trying to bolster different recipes in there that originally had alcohol bases and would take that alcohol out and replace it with a lot of times vinegar, which to me, sometimes I tried a few of the recipes and I was like, well, this is too much vinegar.
Mm.
Not
It's
just
not the
really,
same.
but this is just too much vinegar.
So Jesse, in those, did you know what they were replacing? So if you wanted to actually put the alcohol in it, you could.
No.
Oh.
So I'm sure though that well, one of the recipes I tried, was for deviled eggs, and I don't usually put alcohol in my deviled eggs anyways, but the
That's true.
vinegar in there did make the eggs fluffier when it came out of the piping bag,
Oh.
but it was very strong on the vinegar end of not what a deviled egg should taste like.
Have you all taken a recipe from something in the collection that you have in this exhibit and made something at home?
I think Jessie is our most explorative of them all. And then our education department does do them with some of their programs too, but I just don't have enough guts. We did have one coworker that made one of the tuna jello things. So that's why we have a big printout of it. Is just kind of more of like an inside joke with the whole staff. Was it went around, and I think 2 people actually ate it, and I have a picture of one of their faces I wish I could put in there. But he would not be very happy about that. So, but yeah, so I think exploratively, I bet Jessie has more of them, but education stuff, we have a lot of the what do you guys do, the over the fire type of stuff in your?
Yeah, one of our day camps, we do a lot of cooking over the fire, and we also go out to our local fair and do demonstrations with open fire cooking. And so we've tried quite a few historic recipes through those programs. A lot of times we adapt them a little bit for modern tastes because, especially with our day camp, it's kids, we want them to eat it. So our cornbread has a little white flour and a lot of sugar in it too, but it did originally come from a historic recipe.
Okay. Back to the Jello. I remember seeing that picture and just, I mean, you should have seen the look on my face just looking at the picture.
Yeah. Yep.
But
that's why we did it.
My husband still likes what his mom used to make, which was an apricot Jello and with cucumbers and carrots and mandarin oranges, I think. I think those were all in there. And he would, to this day, he would still eat that if she made it.
Yeah.
I don't like to add things to my Jello. Anyway.
I think cookbooks also kind of evolved from the science of it all, and and all the measurings and figuring that out. And then during the war, trying to get people to use less of some things. So we had it for World War II. They would create all of it. The war kitchen really created a lot of different cookbooks, which we focus on a little bit too with the rationing. And it's like, here's a ration cookbook and all these things that you are able to get. Here's how you can make this work for a week. So, so that I think that's a big evolution in using cookbooks, especially for like, our grandparents and well, at least my grandparents and stuff like that was a big thing.
Right. Right. Yeah, mine would have been too. Are there just, I think the last thing on the cookbook specifically, but was there any very unusual ingredient that you found that you're all like, we don't ever see this, or hadn't heard of it and had to find out what it even was? Is there anything like that?
I still love the red dye every once in a while you'll see in cookbooks.
To add red dye?
Yeah.
Really?
It's usually a lot of the chef cookbooks more have, because they always threw red dye in restaurants to make it look prettier. And so you'll find those in recipes that sometimes you're like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to skip that part.
Yeah.
People would actually have a bottle of that. Well, I suppose, I mean, we have food coloring still.
Yeah.
We use it in our frostings and things. So I want to talk to you, Jessie. I have a feeling you're going to be able to answer some of these questions. I want to actually talk about the artifacts, the actual pieces, some of them. What are some of the most interesting or the odd kitchen tools that you found that you put on display?
So one of my kind of fun ones that I really liked was we have a churn that fits into a Maytag washer for making butter. So the usage of why you have electricity now coming in, you have electricity to gas running stoves, and they still can't kind of get out of the range of still using the same way of making butter. They want to use a churn, but how are they going to make it faster? Well, the KitchenAid wasn't quite in everybody's house yet, so Maytag had a chamber you could put in, and it had a paddle in there that would make the the butter. So
I'm sorry, I'm
yeah,
holding back my laughter, but that's brilliant.
yeah.
You have a machine that's already doing a motion that you need to wash your
Yep.
clothes, and now it's going to make your butter?
Yes,
All right, Maytag is an original, right?
that's right. But even I mean, a lot of those artifacts that show even the microwaves, like when we have some of the original documentation that came with some of those microwaves, and it's like they expect me to do my Thanksgiving dinner in a microwave. And
Oh,
I mean, their old time microwaves putting out some of that not good vibes. I don't think I
yeah.
really want my turkey in there, but it's the artifacts too that just supplement all that information that you start seeing is as things progress. Um, you get your boxed goods. Well, why do I need these kitchen tools when now I just need a stand mixer or something that I can beat it all together with and mix it? It's becomes more convenient and makes the
Mhm.
time again a lot faster so that when you're getting home you can have that still full meal that your husband was expecting in most of those households well before the 40s.
Yeah. While you're wearing your
Yeah.
dress and your pearls still and your high
Yep.
heels in the kitchen. Hmm.
Yeah. I do that all the
Yeah,
time.
me
Yeah.
too. I wonder if somehow this is how garage sales or rummage sales evolved. People get
Okay.
the new stuff, now they got to figure out how to sell the old stuff. You have this really neat area in your exhibit. You'll have to tell me what it's called, but it's like, was it Guess the Tool?
Yep.
And behind this cabinet in the glass, you have all these different thingamajigs, gadgets, and you have them numbered and then a little key off to the side. So my mom and I sort of played that. Of course, I wasn't going to be able to answer what most of them were, but she could, and she only got stumped on a couple of them. But that was really neat. Do you have one that stumped most people? They just don't ever get. Or maybe you don't want to share it. Maybe we want everybody to go there and try to figure it out. I don't know.
Yes, you have to come and find out for yourselves.
Yeah. Because with some things, when you look at it, you're like, that makes no sense how that could work. And then when you start thinking a lot, I mean, once you figure out what it is, you're like, oh, I'd love to still show how it would work in some of those cases because the
Oh.
bread maker, some of the kroomkaka skillets and things like that. Those are very traditional items that you were used and now obsolete. They're replaced by
Mhm.
something more convenient. So that's a
Right.
fun area. It's one of my favorite
Some of
areas. I love doing this.
some of them look dangerous. So
Yeah.
you're like, that was in the kitchen? Not quite sure. But I don't know if you're ever, I mean, in the area, have you ever heard somebody was talking about it earlier about being able to hear when there's multi-generational people looking at the exhibit and they start telling stories. Were there any of those items that kind of sparked that nostalgia for some visitors?
The ice cream area is a big part.
Oh.
Have like a case that has a lot of the ice cream things, and they'll talk about sitting outside. I heard one person talk about sitting outside and just constantly, and every single kid had to spin the ice cream as they're making the ice cream while running around and playing, and have somebody else take over just to get the ice cream. I heard that story once. There's a lot of them, and I do like to go sneak in there every once in a while, especially if you could see that there's a couple different age levels in there. Especially I would say right now a lot of it is like if it's the younger kids and with the crock pots. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and they're saying, I still have that one. What's going on? That kind of thing
Yeah.
is probably one of the is the biggest that should not be on exhibit is usually what people say.
But the
Because if I have
colors,
that, but the colors are very,
the size, and a glass lid. Those are, you can't get the glass lid ones anymore, and you guys
no.
have those on display. So those are it fits in there to me.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has heard any other good stories as they're walking through.
I think the
Mhm.
kitchen vignette, the kind of 40s, 50s kitchen, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, that looks just like mom's or just like
Mm.
grandma's, depending on their age. And So I think having that whole kitchen there, it's a very visual component of the exhibit, and I think people really love that. And it has a sense of nostalgia for those of us who are older that remember kitchens looking like that in some houses.
Where did you get that?
We just
The
built it. We
the
built it on,
sink?
yeah. Well, the sink is, we actually found that when it was sitting in somebody's, behind a barn somewhere. We found it on probably Facebook Marketplace. And
Okay.
and we went down into just into Iowa, I think is where we had to go pick it up. But yeah, he goes, yeah, we just cleaned it up as much as we could because it was back in the behind the barn that
Yeah.
they took out of their farmhouse. And I just wanted that style of sink to really keep the look of it all. But then
Mhm.
the oven and the fridge are from our collection. So, but then yeah, we built everything else. Made sure it was soft close so kids don't slam the doors all the time.
Yeah.
Weird things you need to think of as an exhibit person.
Yeah. Well, and that brings me to, I wanted to ask kind of some fun behind the scenes things, but it made me think about where you get your items too, and we can talk about that. But wondering when somebody even has, say, a really old home or something, that they are taking these really old woodworks or built-ins or Hoosier cabinets or these big sink cupboard type thing. Anyway, all the old things, and they maybe just toss them out. But are there museums sometimes that might be interested in that kind of stuff? Would that be an avenue somebody should look into before just throwing it in a pile and getting rid of it?
Yeah, we definitely look at when people come to us and are like, we're getting out a house. We look at the provenance of the house, who lived there, the condition of the artifact. Our museum, we focus on taking an artifact in that is in enough condition that we can put it right out on exhibit. And that not only is because we can then put it out on exhibit and show everybody, but it's also for the safety of the artifact. The cleaner, the nicer looking it is, the well kept it is, those things are going to last many, many years longer than something that comes in that's already starting to rust or
Mm.
peeling paint and broken in a certain way. We do still kind of look into those artifacts and don't overlook them and just say, well, just because it's rusty, we're not going to take it. We try to again find the story behind it, and some of the items when they come into us, it's kind of like, well, this has been in a house in downtown Sioux Falls or this area of Sioux Falls for 110 years. So we can document who's used the oven. Sometimes artifacts will come in their original boxes. So
Mm.
in like our area for the ice cream, we have an area that has the box and the item outside of the box. So to have the original packaging, again, shows the time period of the artifact. Sometimes people come in and they bring in a receipt or a picture of them using the item. So it's just kind of a gamut of what that museum's looking for. There are a lot of museums that use these artifacts still, not so many of the electrical ones, but gas ranges and wood burning ovens and stoves and stuff like that are seeked out by museums that do interpretation. So it's never something that, oh, I'll just throw it away, maybe offer it to one of those types of museums that they might be able to use it for an exhibit at some point.
Sure. I bet you nerd out when you get a really cool piece come in, don't you, Jesse? Well, all you
Yeah.
maybe do, but you're like, yeah, my gosh, and there's a story to go behind it. Yeah. Uh, Behind the scenes, did this take you, I mean, from the idea to getting it out and opening it to the public, 6 months, 2 years?
Well,
Just
a
to give
lot of
people
this,
an idea how much work goes behind the scenes, because you have your writing, getting the objects, you have to label things, get photos, research, so much that goes into this. Couple years?
yeah, so everybody on staff is doing a research project. They should be doing a research project at all times.
Oh,
And so that's kind of what happens is like they'll be doing a research project, we'll have our meetings, and then we'll start to go, okay, this one might be a good one. And with the cookbooks, it was just basically going to be cookbooks. Then we have to always also look at our space and how will it work, because we have to have certain types of exhibits. so we get a good mix of things throughout the whole building. And then we also have to look at the space too. So then when we realized, well, this one would fit at this time, but we're going to be putting it in a bigger space. Let's look at more items maybe. And then that's when we decided to do the kitchen. So, and I would bet like what it was like 3 or 4 years before that.
I mean, I first proposed the topic in 2013. I looked
Yeah.
back at my
Yeah.
my abstract that I
Yeah.
had written, and it was 10 years before it made it on the schedule.
Oh my
Yeah.
And
gosh, Jill.
I wasn't researching the whole time, but I'd find something here or there and stick it
Yeah.
away in a folder.
Yeah.
But
So then
probably a good 2 years of
yeah,
pretty
then once
serious
it's on the
work on it.
schedule, then you really get serious about looking at it and really kind of bringing in all of this all the rabbit holes together, and figuring out where we need to go. And I would say, building an exhibit, it's a good 6 months, but research and writing and finding all the artifacts and breaking it all down would probably be another. We're in the galleries usually about 2 months to actually build and install. So
That's a lot of time.
yeah.
I'm glad it gets to stay there for a couple years, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We try to rotate out. We get a good 3 or 4 exhibits every year in our buildings. So it's kind of nice to keep it fresh for everybody. But I have a big feeling that people are going to come in and go, "Where's that kitchen exhibit?" when this one's down. So I think I'll speak for most of us. I think this was a very popular exhibit, and I'm very proud of this one with the way everybody worked together. But it's fun. I mean, I like food. I like cooking.
Most people do.
Yeah. So this one, I think, just is great. It was just a fun one to do too.
Yeah.
I learned a lot on this one about cooking.
Food is a universal topic. So, I mean, I have a podcast that we mostly talk about food. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, whether you do cook, don't cook. I mean, if you have DoorDash on speed dial because you don't cook, I mean, it still is interesting and you still have memories and things like that. So is there anything in this exhibit that you really wanted to include, but just couldn't, like it wouldn't fit through the door, or you couldn't get your hands on it, or it broke?
I will say the lustrum stuff from that home. It's like, I really don't know the history of it all, but it's all the stainless steel upper cabinet, lower cabinet, which was really cool and very modern. For when was that built, Jessie?
Those were popular in the 30s, 40s, because we were coming out of so it's big pieces. Heavy pieces.
Is it something that you have that you've acquired, but you just couldn't put it on the display?
Right. Yep. Yeah. And it comes down to whether the artifact too. We have a couple other refrigerators that could have come out, but they're really close to the time periods that we already had out. So we picked the best of the best amongst them. We didn't use every single cookbook in our collection, but darn near close. So there's still some other books that we could have added to there that just didn't make the cut, whether it's just the condition of the outside of the book just didn't look as pristine and nice. And a lot of the other books, we were trying to really incorporate a little bit of the style of why it's out there. So time period, what you would be looking for as recipes. And of course, when you get into Jell-O and Dr. Pepper cookbooks and stuff like that, it's branding.
Yep. Jill, I think you kind of mentioned this earlier where you were talking about foodways and history. If we talk just a second about the cultural influences and immigrant food traditions. So, I mean, we have the Germans from Russia and we have the Norwegians. We have a lot of different cultures of people. And so that's why around here, like in my family, it is krumkaka and lefse and sandbachels and those types of things. But what role did immigration and those traditions, like their holidays or any of that, shape sort of the Midwest cooking that we have in this area that you're familiar with anyway?
Sure. I mean, we had so many immigrants to the area that it would be hard for it not to influence the food.
Yeah.
I think people cook what they're comfortable with. So new immigrants coming in were bringing the dishes that they were making at home, but then they started sharing with neighbors at, the Sunday church potluck, or especially during the Great Depression when people were just trying to share everything they had so that, they were taking care of people around them. Those traditions really spread. And you're right, it's mostly German and kind of Scandinavian in this area. Although, you move to more recent times and we have newer immigrant groups that have also brought traditional foodways. I think a lot of these foodways kind of stuck around with, as you mentioned, holidays. A lot of the holiday treats are some of the ones that we still look for and make and enjoy today. Whereas kind of your main dish might be a little more Americanized at this point.
Like
there were
turkey in a
also,
microwave.
yeah, well, I haven't tried that one.
No.
Meatballs in the crock pot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even in South Dakota, I did an article for the Food Network once, and it was iconic foods of South Dakota, and I wrote about 27 foods. And I learned some new ones. Although I grew up in Brookings, South Dakota, I learned some new foods that I hadn't even heard of within our own state. Fleischkugel was one of them, and you guys can get that down. Was it Freeman area? Where did I go and I got that? It's on a restaurant menu. And I had never even heard of it. So I think there's still a lot of those influences in even just little pockets of the states, just like any state, you'll find that. And wajapi, that was the fruit sauce, like the berry,
Delicious.
raspberry sauce. Yeah, with the Indian
On fry
tacos.
bread.
Right.
Yes.
And I went out to Crazy Horse and had it at their restaurant at Crazy Horse, but I had never heard of it. And it's delicious, a Native American sauce. So food media trends, food trends, these companies. We talked a lot about Jello today. I feel like we are all recommending not to mix tuna and Jello together, but that's your prerogative. um, but what kind of role did the food companies kind of have in pushing forward what were in cookbooks or what people were making? I mean, even oatmeal, when I think about at some point we started adding oatmeal to those meatballs in the crock pot or to meatloaf because it was a filler to kind of make that meat go further. But any interesting things that you learned, I guess, about media, food companies or
I think the big thing is these companies wanted to get their products in the hands of consumers, and so they were doing as much advertising as they could. In some cases, that meant publishing their own cookbooks with recipes that all, of course, use their product. Packaged yeast. Maybe you weren't used to packaged yeast, so you could buy your yeast and get this free little booklet that gave you, 20, 30 recipes to use with this new packaged yeast. That was part of the big appeal of Jello, honestly. They had a massive marketing campaign and they got that product out there and they really appealed to consumers. You mentioned oatmeal. I know one of the things that made oatmeal really popular was that they were including free dishes. You could buy your can of oatmeal and get a piece of china. And they had whole sets. So you'd want to go buy their oatmeal again. So you might get the matching teacup to the saucer you got last time.
And you know what, Jill? That's funny that you said that because I just recently learned from my mom. We were talking about my grandma Janet's cookie recipe for mother's cookies, which is her version of, well, it was her mother's very far back, 100-some-year-old recipe, like a molasses cookie. Anyway, my mom said, I remember that she would use this green glass that had sort of a starburst pattern on the bottom of it, and that's what she always used to make her cookie, have that little decoration. And she said that glass came in an oatmeal canister. Exactly right.
Kind of
Yeah.
like when we were kids and we wanted the good cereal with the good toy in the bottom, right? I didn't pick the cereal I liked. I picked the cereal that had the best toy.
Yeah.
Why did we go to McDonald's?
Right. Last little topic I want to touch on because you have a really neat little area that talks about food, chefs and celebrities and sort of the home economists and how celebrity chefs, I mean, if we look back to Julia Child, or how did that influence the American cooking?
I think it's just the whole chef thing and being the restaurants themselves. But yeah, Julia probably is one of the first. I mean, there's other people that have had cookbooks, but because she became so popular on television, is why hers kind of went more out there. And then there's others that followed, obviously, because I mean, just turn on the television, any channel, you're going to have another celebrity chef out there, and on cooking shows and here and there. I think the draw to those type of books is, even if you didn't taste what Julia was making, you saw her reaction to it at the end, you wanted to try that one. You see them with their reactions, like, is that really that good? I really want to find out if that's that good. So I'm going to get that cookbook so I can do it. And then kept going from there. I mean, it wasn't until Ina Garten is actually the first one that actually ate in front of people on the television. Julia did a little bit, I think, other than Bon Appetit. But yeah, I would say Ina Garten was one of the first that really kind of ate in front of you. And then I think that's why you wanted to know why do you think you're making this? Why do you think, is it really that good?
Right.
I'm going to buy that cookbook. Yeah.
And not only that, but I think a lot of these celebrity chefs, especially the early ones like Julia Child, cooking had always been a chore from the earliest times. All of these kitchen innovations were to lessen the drudgery of housework. And Julia Child especially started to bring the joy of cooking. It can be fun. Don't do all of those packaged goods to make your meal. Look at what cooking from scratch can do. It can be fun. It can be delicious.
Yeah.
It kind of started cooking as more of a hobby.
Yeah. And I always thought it was interesting that, it was always the woman's job to cook at home. But when you went to all these really fine restaurants and everything, it was always all these men doing it. And so then it's like, where's the women chefs out there? And I think, there's James Beard and all these guys that were telling you how to cook, but then you're like, oh, wait a second. And then you get the Martha Stewarts and the Julia Childs out there that are really teaching you.
You're right, Molly. And those chef guys probably learned from the women.
They learned, if you look at any of their interviews, most of them say, well, mom or great grandma was making it like this, and then they go on and then they go to a school that only men could go to, and then they learned how to do it. So I kind of like the ebb and flow and how it's coming back to anybody can cook. And I'm sorry, I'm quoting a Disney movie, but anyone can cook. It's one of my favorite movies, Ratatouille. If you're a big chef fan, that's a good one. But that's where it's coming back to, and I think that's great. Yeah, even rats can cook.
Not in my kitchen.
No, great point though about television and how that opened access to anyone anywhere as long as they had that television set to see the cooking. So that probably even opened things up in the kitchen, even though it's a invention outside of the kitchen. You do have additional exhibits. So there's a couple, or there's a handful of exhibits there. I know for sure. I wrote down these two that I want to go back to look at. When my mom and I were there, we only went to the kitchen one, but the symbol of freedom, the US flag, that one looks really, really fun. And then I really want to go to Now Hear This, breakthroughs in recorded sound. Yes. And that evolution. So I have reasons to go back and see some more, but
the flag one is not open anymore. That one.
Oh, that one's done.
Yep. But it's a very cool school spirit exhibit, which kind of talks about all the things you could do to show your loyalty to your school. But the radio one is really cool. Now Hear This, kind of evolution of the sound. And then soon we're going to be doing a new Native American exhibit. So that will be a fun one. And then also how South Dakota celebrates America later this year. It's going to be another fun. So that will kind of get some of that flag stuff for you again.
Yeah. Well, where can people learn more about the exhibits and then plan their visit to the Old Courthouse Museum? Your hours, address, website, social media, all that.
Go for it, Jill.
So our website is siouxlandmuseums.com. We are also on Facebook as Old Courthouse Museum, Sioux Falls, so you can find us that way. We're located right downtown, and we are in the original county courthouse. So we're a big stone building with a clock tower. We're really easy to find once you get
Right.
downtown. Right down on the corner of 6th and Main.
It's a beautiful building. How old's the building?
1889 is when they started construction. So
Even that is fun to just be in the building.
it
And
is. It is.
You have some free parking in the lot.
We have a little bit of
the
free parking
building.
in behind us and then metered parking on the streets. We're on a corner, so plenty of on-street parking as well if the free parking happens to be filled.
Okay. And admission to the museum is free?
Admission is free. We do have a donation box if people are so inclined, but there's no admission charge. We are open 7 days a week. So Sunday is a little bit shortened hours. We're only open noon to 5. And we only have one evening that we have hours. Thursday evenings we're open till 9 p.m. But
okay. And there's a great gift shop in there too.
Oh, wonderful.
there is.
There's a lot
Yes.
of cookbooks in there.
Yeah.
There are.
We found a lot of reproductions of some of the popular cookbooks that we have there, and then a lot of local chefs and things like that have some cookbooks. So it's
Okay.
a very good.
And other kitchen items too. I think
Yeah.
she has some
Yeah.
fun towels in there and recipe boxes and all kinds of things to
Yeah,
go along
tea
with the
towels are-
cooking exhibit.
Yeah.
I love
It's
those
a
tea
fun,
towels.
museums are a great place to shop anyway. I love the South Dakota, the Ag Heritage Museum in Brookings.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll just go in there and shop because they always have really nice things that are more localized. I did also want to mention, because this is a question I had that I sent somebody an email before my mom and I visited to make sure, but it's also handicap accessible. So we found if we parked in the back, there's a lot of handicap spots in the back, and then use the ramp there to come up that back door. So
Yes.
if you see those steps, there is a way to get in the back.
And we do have an elevator as well to get between floors because we have 3
Sure.
floors where our exhibits are located. So
Okay. And this exhibit, the kitchens exhibit, will close when? Do you know? Or no?
Not for sure yet, but
Okay.
so this summer it's for sure going to be there. Yeah, we haven't quite figured out the exact time. And sometimes when we have exhibits like this, we're going to kind of nudge them along a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah. Keep it there for a while.
Yeah. Yep.
But as of right now, it's the summer of 2025. It's there right now. We just don't know how
Mhm.
much longer. So that means you have to be quick about getting in there,
Yes.
just in case. Do you each of you have a favorite item in the exhibit? You maybe have already actually each mentioned what your favorite is. Jessie, did you say it was the washer with the churn for the butter?
Yep, that's one of my favorites. A lot of the cookbook covers are great to see. I like to nerd out to the Jello molds because you can also make it look so pretty. So again, my little dress and my pearls, and then a Jello of ring around tuna. It's okay. It's what I do.
Jill, did you share what your favorite is?
I mentioned that Buckeye cookbook. That's one of my favorite cookbooks. That would probably be my favorite in the exhibit. But one of the really fun ones is our fireless cooker. That's very, very old. Do you know the date on that, Jessie, off the top of your head?
Pre-1900, so 1880s, 80s, 1890s.
But it's a slow cooker, kind of like our modern crock pots. But instead of, electricity, you would heat a big iron plate or stones and put them in there with your food, and you would just let it slow cook to delicious tenderness.
I must have missed that. I feel like I didn't. See, now I'm gonna have to pop in there again and look.
Yeah.
There's a couple people that thought that was like a chamber pot or something. Oh, that's where you go to the bathroom. And it's like, there's a kitchen
Not in
exhibit.
the
Why would we
kitchen.
have that in there? But that's what it looks like. It's just a little box. Yeah, that was funny. You picked the same thing that I did. I was going to go with that, and some of the World War II cookbooks. Those ration cookbooks are pretty cool. And then some of the other one, the Wilcox cookbook, is actually another cool one too.
If you haven't read the book, I don't know if you guys like to read fiction stories, but if you like to read, I think you guys would enjoy The Kitchen Front. Okay. If you haven't already read it, but it involves, cooking and a competition and radio. So there's like this really
Oh.
cool mix. I loved that book. I tell everybody about it. So, all right. One last thing. Is there a favorite recipe from your own personal collection that you would add to this exhibit if you could? And do you have a story behind it?
Well, you're going to have to go to the museum store to figure that out, because we did create a museum cookbook, and I think all three of us had put a couple in there. So you can find them out there.
That's it. I'm going back. What's that called? Is it just like the Old Courthouse Museum family cookbook, something?
Yes,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
We did our own community cookbook and
Yeah.
I
had our
love
staff
it.
and volunteers submit recipes. So
And then we also snuck in some from our museum cookbook collection. We have a couple recipes from there and there as well.
Oh, I can't
and
wait
we
to
included
get
a
mine.
few from our outreach programs
Yeah,
as well.
that
Some
too.
of the ones that are really popular at our day camps and our fair demos have made their way in there as well.
Oh, that's great. Now, everybody needs to stop in and get one of those too,
Yeah,
especially
there you go.
including me.
The cornbread for the galaxy's most popular cornbread out of the Dutch oven is from our day camp, and that recipe is in that cookbook. So to get that,
Okay.
you have to go check that out.
All right. Do you sell local honey in the store too?
We have in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have to double check, but yeah, we have in the
Yeah.
past. So
I think she
All
still
right.
has
Yeah, I
some in
think
there.
if we get it in,
Sure. All right. Ladies, thank you so much. This has been so interesting, and I hope people will have time to stop in, and it's well worth the visit to stop in and look at all the exhibits, not just this one, but this one was my favorite so far. So
Well, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks for having us today.
You're supposed to say bon appetit.
oh, there you go. Bon appetit.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Jill, Jessie, and Molly, for sharing your stories behind Cooking Up History. You'll find links to the Old Courthouse Museum plus photos from the exhibit on my website, randomsweets.com. And if you're in the Sioux Falls area, be sure to visit the museum. And of course, remember to get yourself a copy of their community cookbook and other goodies in the museum store. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens and share it with your friends. And thank you to those of you who have been listening since episode 1 in 2022. I'm your host, Staci Mergenthal. Sweet wishes.